Hi, everyone. I'm County Executive Joe Parisi, and welcome to this week's Dane County Podcast. It is summer, and so what we see a lot of happening in summertime in Dane County is people heading out to our Dane County parks. And one of the pieces of our parks that we're very proud of and that get a lot of use are our bike trails. We have an extensive bike path system in place, connecting parks, connecting bigger trails, going between communities, and we continue to expand despite the fact that we are a very fast growing community, which always makes it a little challenging. We know that the people of Dane County love their bike trails and want us to keep doing everything we can to expand them and make the system even better. Today we have Chris James with us. Chris is the guy who oversees the development of all of our bike trails in Dane County. It's a pretty big job. He's the Director of Planning and Development in the Parks Division, and so we're really happy to have Chris here with us today to talk a little bit about our parks and particularly our bike paths. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me down.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. So, Chris, I thought maybe we could just start by maybe giving folks just a general overview, an overview of our bike system and what it looks like out there.
Yeah, and I often use an analogy of kind of the road system, and there's interstates, and then you've got your kind of big arterial connector roads, and then your smaller local connectors. And at Dane County, we work on developing kind of that interstate system that really is county-wide. It stretches out through all parts of the county, both in the city area here and then out into the rural areas as well. And that system then, our hope is that the smaller communities and the local units of government then connect into that. One thing too, I don't think many people realize is that we also work a lot on the state trails in partnership with the DNR. The Capital City Trail, the Glacial Drumlin Trail, and the Great Sauk Trail are all also state trail projects, but the county is really leading a lot of those efforts. So we're really working on that big system, and as you mentioned, trying to connect trails to trails and parks to trails.
Excellent. That's great, Chris. So, Chris, when I think of our bike trails, you're right. There are so many different types of trails, so many places. One of the most popular and fairly recent additions within the last few years, time flies, it may have even been a little more than a few now, has been the Lower Yahara Trail, which links a couple of our parks, goes through some beautiful territory, has some really unique construction involved in the creation of it. Could you talk a little bit about the Lower Yahara Trail?
Sure. That was a really unique project that we finished actually in 2017, but a little on the history. That concept has been in our Parks and Open Space Plan, or it had been for over 25 years. And the planning for that trail actually took almost 10 years. And it was just an incredibly challenging project, I'll say, from a variety of perspectives. It wasn't easy to access the area where the trail was built because of the lakeshore. There wasn't a lot of environmental considerations, a lot of cultural considerations. So there was just tremendous amount of planning and coordination and collaboration. And then we built the trail in about a year and a half. So really neat project, very popular.
So where is that trail exactly? What does that connect and hook up to in the bigger scheme of things?
Sure. That's so the project technically starts at Lunny Lake Farm Park by the Lucier Family Heritage Center. There's a small parking lot trailhead right where the Cap City Trail kind of ends at Lake Farm Road. And then the trail's proposed to go all the way down to Stoughton, which is about 15 miles. And so phase one goes from Lunny Lake Farm Park at the Cap City Trail over to McDaniel Park in the village of McFarland.
Yeah, and what's really neat about that is you're connecting two different communities, mostly through and over water, and it allows people in McFarland to come into the park there and then connect to the Cap City Trail. So you can go from McFarland all the way to downtown Madison via that trail, right?
You can go back that other way, and if depending on what source you believe, that boardwalk is probably one of the longest in the country
Hmm.
for just a designated walking bicycle boardwalk. And I've been amazed since we built the trail. Every time I go there, the number of people I see who have mobility issues or who clearly are pretty old that are getting out, and it's getting them outside because the trail's flat and it's easy to walk on. So that's just great to see.
Yeah, it's great work. It's such a beautiful, beautiful area over there. It's really, really nice to see. Another trail that we are in the midst of building and partially complete, again, putting together all those different parcels and figuring out how to meander, especially, with, again, the increasing urbanization that we're seeing, but that is and will be really popular is the North Mendota Trail that will connect basically 113, aka Northport Drive, to Middleton. Could you talk a little bit about where we're at and where we hope to be with that trail?
Yeah, so there's actually been quite a bit happening on that trail within the last 5 years here. The county did partner with the town of Westport and help them to plan and construct the boardwalk that you see now on the south side of M over 6 Mile Creek. And that was a pretty significant piece because it connected Woodland Drive over to North Bayshore Drive. And now, more recently, Dane County Parks operations staff actually constructed the piece of trail from North Shore Bay Drive through Governor Nelson State Park. And that was done in partnership with DNR, and it was a parks-led project, and that just finished up. There'll be a ribbon cutting coming up here in July. I think July 14th it is. And then there's already trail in place from Gov Nelson over to the T-Wall development. So we're kind of missing that piece between T-Wall and Middleton, and that's definitely a high priority for us. And the other piece of it is from Woodland Drive back to 113. I talked to Pam Dunphy at Highway this morning, and actually that piece should be done by 2024 as part of the County M reconstruction project. So we're getting really close on a big trail initiative that's going to be extremely popular and really, I think, improve the safety of cycling on the north side of the lake there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because now, people ride their bikes on Highway M between 113 and Middleton. And unfortunately, there have even been some tragedies on that road. So it's really our priority to make biking as safe as possible. And in this case, it's going to be incredibly scenic as well. So that's a great project. I thought I'd mention just a couple other projects by name because we get asked about these a lot. And maybe you could just give a quick overview of where they're at. Could you talk to us about the Glacial Drumlin Trail?
Yeah, I probably get more calls and
Yeah.
questions about that trail project than anyone. And that's basically, there's a gap of about 6 miles between Cottage Grove and Madison. And it's a connection between the Glacial Drumlin State Trail in Cottage Grove to the Capital City Trail just on the west side of I-39 in the city of Madison. And so right now our focus is we're trying to build the piece that goes under the interstate. And obviously there's a lot of collaboration with DOT and DNR and the railroad there, and to connect that to Buckeye Road. And that piece in itself will be a pretty big safety improvement because it will allow riders to kind of bypass riding on Buckeye Road out of Madison. So really excited about that. I think you're going to see a lot more to come on that in the next year or so here.
Excellent. And that's really another fast developing area of town too. So that's really great that we're able to be making headway there. So we've talked a little bit about kind of our collaboration. We try to work with the local governments. We try to connect parks. And the last trail I wanted to ask you about is a collaboration not only among communities within Dane County, but also with our neighbors in Sauk County. It's the Great Sauk Trail and the Walking Iron Trail kind of combined. Could you give us a little overview of that and what the hope is, where we're at, what some of our biggest challenges are moving forward?
Yeah, that's another really cool project, very unique. It starts in Sauk City, where the railroad trestle used to be there was a business, McFarland's there just downriver from the Highway 12 bridge. And I think it was 4 years ago now, the railroad trestle kind of failed and fell down and it was removed from the river. And so the first part of that is to actually construct a new multi-purpose trail bridge over the Wisconsin River at Sauk City going into Dane County. And then the hope from there and the vision is that we continue on the rail bed all the way to the village of Mazomanie. So it's going to be a really neat trail, and what a great hookup to Devil's Lake State Park, actually, eventually for riders. As you can imagine, it's pretty complex building a bike trail over the Wisconsin River and all of the other coordination that goes with that. But we are actively working on that project now, and I think you're going to see a lot more move in the next couple of years on that.
That's great. Yeah, and it's so visionary. And like you said, can you imagine that one day, hopefully people will be able to ride from Madison, mainly off-road on bike trails, to Devil's Lake. And that's just
pretty huge.
Great for everyone involved, great for the riders and the economy and recreation. It's really something. So Chris, so we look at all these different trails and everything that goes into making them. They're at various stages. You know, a lot of times when we think about trails, and I think people think about bike trails, we think of the cost, right? Which can be significant. But ironically, sometimes the actual funding and literally building the trail when it's time are kind of the least tall hurdles to cross, right? Because there's so much that goes into it to put it together to the various pieces to get it to the place where we can finally build it. Could you talk a little bit about, you know, what goes into creating a trail from vision to acquisition to reality? And I'm sure it's different with every trail, but I know there are a lot of similarities too, and it's not as easy as people might think.
Yeah, and the overall vision is in the County Parks and Open Space Plan. There's actually a regional trail map, and not very detailed. It just kind of shows dots going across the county, and that's the starting point where we kind of hatch the concepts. But then when we actually get down to actually planning and building a specific trail, the planning part, oftentimes minimum it's 2 years. There's no way you can do it faster than that. But oftentimes it could be 5, 10, or maybe even more, just because of all the different things that go into it. We're basically trying to build small roads and bridges across the county, and a lot of times the county doesn't own all the land. So there's a tremendous amount of coordination with other agencies and other partners, and there's a lot of environmental review before we even do one thing. We have to look, are there threatened and endangered species? Sometimes there's nesting seasons we got to avoid. There's spawning seasons. There's bald eagles. And a huge thing in Dane County is the Ho-Chunk Nation. There's tremendous amount of cultural lands that we have to be very sensitive about how we go through these lands to make sure we don't disrupt them. And all of those things just literally take years to kind of navigate through to make sure that we're leaving the softest footprint we can. And that can be challenging sometimes. So I always kind of joke that building the trail is the easy part. When we get to construction, I just kind of breathe a sigh of relief because the hard work is done then, and away we go.
Yeah, I was thinking the analogy years ago. I was a house painter, and by the time you paint the house, it's all good, but it's the prep, it's the scraping, the sanding, the priming, et cetera. And it's, I think of some of the trails that I've been involved with and that you brief me on a regular basis. We deal with things like, okay, the county might own some land, or the county may be purchasing some land, then maybe the city owns it, or the DNR. Can we go through there? As with North Mendota Trail, a private developer is developing something. Can they create part of the path there? Is there a landowner that will give us an easement to put it so we get around here? Is there someone who's willing to sell? And it's, to be expected that when you're getting really close to having all the pieces together, you're going to have one piece that someone, for one reason or another, does not want to work with you on. And so you either have to work to see if you can find an agreement or change the route a little bit. And perhaps the most interesting and challenging pieces can be if you have to cross a railroad track. That is a major endeavor and process to go through in order to either cross or even sometimes ride alongside one within a certain distance. And so when you think of our landscape and these longer paths that you put together, and all of those various pieces all have to fit and work and have to be worked through. So it's incredibly labor intensive and time intensive for our staff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Dane County, we've been pretty lucky. We've had a good relationship with the railroad. I know a lot of communities, they kind of cringe, oh, we got to work with the railroad, but um, we've been really lucky that way. I, I think we are always trying to be sensitive of their concerns for the safety and having a trail in close
Yep.
proximity. And that's really what the bottom line is on working with the railroad.
Yep. And then also sometimes we'll work with the railroads and the state on the Rails to Trails program. Could you tell folks a little bit about what that is and how that fits in?
Yeah, and so the one that we're working on right now is the Walking Iron Trail, where we're investigating actually converting the rail bed from the Wisconsin River to the village of Mazo, from a rail to a trail. And as you can imagine, that's a pretty lengthy process. The railroad has to agree to abandon that stretch of railroad because they either don't use it anymore, or it's not active. There we're looking at a couple different scenarios. They are using that for car storage now, but the rail trail is kind of a state federal program. And then the county, when they go through the abandonment process, the county then plans, designs, builds, and operates, maintains the trail.
Okay, great. So another piece that we've become involved with is on the local government side of things, cities, towns, villages that may be interested in building trails, and looking for folks to partner with, especially folks to help in the funding, because you could be a small village and want to do something, but you just don't have the dollars. And we have a program in the county government we refer to as Park and Ride that helps work with local governments and helps them get over the finish line with the funding piece of a trail. Could you talk a little bit about that and how it works, maybe some projects or what type of projects we've helped to fund?
Yeah, so Park and Ride has been around since 2015, and I think we've funded over $2.4 million in projects now, which is pretty impressive. And it's a cost share program. It's 50-50, and I think we've offered it maybe every other year, and some years maybe not. But I think what's really successful about it is we've got local units of government out there who maybe could never afford to do a trail project, but with our assistance are able to actually help us implement the county regional trail system. And that's huge because obviously we're struggling just to do our own projects, let alone all the many other ones out there. So I think it's been pretty neat to watch all of these locals that are really getting on board with this regional trail system and just very eager to connect into that system. And this program has helped them do that. And some of the ones that come to mind that I think are been pretty significant are on the west side of the county, the village of Mazomanie, and then there's a nonprofit, Wolf Run, that are working on the Black Earth Creek Trail. And that is part of the initiative that would go from Mazomanie all the way to Middleton. And they have planned and constructed that trail all the way to Wisconsin Heights High School now. And that was done in large part through funding assistance from Dane County. The city of Madison has also been working a lot, and more recently on bike parks and also mountain bike trails as well. So it isn't just the regional trails, and more so now we're looking at these bicycle playgrounds. And those are parks and playgrounds that kids use to kind of develop their bicycle skills in a very safe environment. And so obviously in Dane County, there's a very large need for that. Another project too, I'm just thinking about is the Glacial Drumlin to Cambridge Trail. And that's significant for us because we have our bike path in Camrock Park, and the village is working on now trying to connect that trail all the way up to Glacial Drumlin. And that's another park and ride program too. So there's projects all over the county. And I guess I just see when I review them, I look at a lot of these communities and think, boy, if we weren't able to help them with this, they probably wouldn't be working on these projects. So really appreciate all of their help on those, helping us see those things happen.
Yeah, there have been some great partnerships. You mentioned some of these other types of, and it's somewhat newer, these bicycle parks. And so could you talk a little bit about what that looks like? Are they the same as kind of off-road biking, or dirt biking as we used to call it? And do you do any of that?
It can be all of the above depending on the bike park, but really there's kind of two different program areas that go on. One is the safety component of it, as I mentioned, and it's maybe creating like some on-street scenarios and sidewalks and things like that to get younger riders exposed to that before they actually have to go out and actually experience it, which enhances safety a lot. And then there's the more fun part of it too, where maybe there's a pump track there where it's kind of like a roller coaster for bikes where they go up and down and they don't have to pedal very much. And there's other more kind of fun parts of it, and those are all kind of helping riders to improve their agility skills. So overall, it's all about improving their skills in a fun environment.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, I know that during the pandemic overall in our parks, we saw a huge increase in usership. And I don't know if you know this off the top of your head or if we even keep track of this, but do you know if the bicycle usage that we saw went up as well? Was that part of our increase? And
There's no doubt about it. And we always kind of estimate between 150 and 200,000 riders per year on our main trails. I haven't seen the numbers for this year. I'm sure they're going up. And one of the measuring sticks is we start getting more and more calls about concerns about congestion on the trails, speed on the trails, because there's just so many more people riding now. And it's great to see. I hope it sticks, and I think it will.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. I mean, biking, it's good for the body, it's good for the soul, especially during the pandemic for people to be able to get out. You can explore such beautiful areas too. When you were talking about the Black Earth Creek, that area in western Dane County is just gorgeous. And, to be able to get out there off trail, we've also, as you're aware, this is more through the highway department, but over the last decade, we've also expanded where we can't do off-road trails. Whenever we're refinishing or redoing a county road, a county highway, if we can fit it, we're adding a bike lane or extra biking lanes on the side of those roads too, because we want people to be able to be as safe as possible. And, people get along a lot better on the roads when the bicyclists have an adequate, and safe lane for them to ride on. So, we're really fortunate when you think of those numbers, when you think of the fact that we continue to build, yet we still have, sometimes crowded trails. Like I said, it's a great problem to have. Do you have a personal favorite trail, Chris?
It's got to be Phase 1 Lower Yahar River Trail.
Yeah.
Just the environment you go through and just the whole story behind the trail. Yep. For sure.
Yeah. So if anyone's in, you can access that trail from the park in McFarland. You can access it from Lenny Lake Farm Park, and you can bike it or you can go walk it too, right? I mean, it's a bike trail, but it's a walking trail, and it's just beautiful, and it goes through, ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk. So it's really a special place. If folks haven't visited it yet, I would agree that'd be a great place to go check out.
Yeah, we often call it a timeless destination between Ho-Chunk 10,000 and here we are still crowding to get there now.
Yeah, and we really appreciate all the partnership with the Ho-Chunk and working with us on this and other trails and on interpretive language that we have and that we're developing throughout the park. We want to make sure and be respectful and acknowledge the fact that they were here first, a long time ago and for a very long time, and we appreciate them. And we appreciate the ability to join, to enjoy the land that the Ho-Chunk people have lived on for so long. Chris, is there anything, we've covered a lot, is there anything I'm missing, anything else we should touch upon regarding bikes that I might have left off my list? Or?
Well, I think just the only other thing I might end with would be people often call me and they ask, what can I do? What can I do to help? And I think you mentioned before funding. We're pretty lucky here. We can usually get the funds for most of the projects. And so I think what really would help out a lot is people, if they could show support at a local level for our regional trail system. Because I think a lot of the communities are getting on board, but there is funding out there. And if they hear support from their residents about they want these connections and they want the regional trails, that's helpful for us. And the other thing too is hopefully if they've heard this podcast, they might understand how long it takes. And you got to be patient for them to get there. And I assure you, I'm working on them every single week, moving them forward, but they take a little time to plan and build.
Yeah, I can second that, and you're really appreciated, Chris, you and all the staff at Land and Water Resources. It is a long and complicated process, and in the end, though, it sure is worth it and sure is gratifying to be able to see the end result, and especially when you see all the people out there enjoying themselves, it shows how meaningful your work is. So, thank you not only for what you do, but thanks for being here with us today. And Chris James from Dane County Parks, if people have any questions, they can always reach out to the parks, reach out to Chris, reach out to my office, and be happy to connect you. So, yeah, Chris, well, thank you again. I hope you have a great summer getting out on the trails and working on this. And hopefully folks have a little better understanding both of our trail system and of how they all come together.
Thanks, Joe.
Absolutely. So, hey, everyone, thank you for being with us today. I hope you found this enjoyable, and we'll see you on the next Dane County Podcast.